All right, guys, I got Jay Ferrugia in the house. He is the last episode that I'm putting on my podcast from the Optimal Body RX series. I hope you guys have enjoyed these. Jay Ferrugia, though, is a fitness industry OG. He has been helping people get jacked and strong since 1994, which was actually a year after I was born. He is the founder of Renegade Strength and Conditioning, and he started one of the original underground warehouse-style gyms where he trained countless high school, college, and pro athletes, during which he originated a small group of training as it's practiced today and introduced the world to little-known training methods that have since become mainstream. He's been featured in pretty much every fitness magazine out there. I'm not going to list them all, but he's been featured in quite a bit there. And he's really an expert at helping those skinny guys who can't really put on a lot of muscle, guys who are a bit older, who work a ton, get lean and get jacked with a no BS approach. So everybody, even you ladies, are going to get something out of today's episode, but let's welcome Jay Ferrugia in the house. Do you guys know how difficult it is to find a high quality supplement line that doesn't just destroy your gut? Most pre-workouts and post-workouts, or even like on-the-go snack options like beef jerky or protein bars, they're terrible for your gut health. They're full of xanthan gum and guar gums and fillers and artificial sweeteners, which disrupt your gut microbiome and lead to chronic bloating, constipation, diarrhea, and not to mention when our gut is off, all of the other symptoms like hormone imbalances, thyroid issues, mental health issues, which is why I'm just obsessed about gut health. But anywho, I have not been able to find a good supplement line out there, and I had to cut out all of these fitness type supplements when I was really struggling with a lot of my own gut issues. Until recently, I found Paleo Valley. And Paleo Valley is one of the first supplement companies that hands down is incredible for your gut health, whether you're on a gut healing journey or you're someone who just wants to optimize your gut health and overall health. Their founder, Autumn, actually suffered with IBS herself. So she created this entire supplement line specifically to be gut friendly. And I'm not lying with you guys. Their whey protein powder, which is grass-fed and finished, gum-free, artificial sweetener-free, no issues, no bloating, no constipation, no diarrhea, no upset stomach, which is literally like the first time in my entire life that I've not had issues with a protein powder. And they even have super yummy grass-fed and finished beef jerky sticks, which are made with a collagen casing instead of the typical citric acid casing, which is terrible for your gut health. And if you want to try out some of their other products, they even have a bone broth protein powder. I love adding that into whether it's like my oatmeal in the morning or my protein shakes. It literally tastes like the Nestle hot chocolate powders, if you ever had those as a kid, which were not gut friendly. And then they have great supplements too, like their apple cider vinegar capsules or even their turmeric capsules, which are great for inflammation and gut health. So if you want to get a discount, you can use my code using the link in the show notes here, which is paleovalley.com/Rachel Scheer podcast. But all of that's going to be in the show notes. So check out the supplement line because guys, you know me, I would not have this on my podcast if it was not awesome and gut friendly. All right, guys, this is Optimal Body RX, and I got Jay Ferrugia here with us today. And Jay, you are a transformation specialist that helps men over the age of 35 get lean and jacked. Would you say you work more with skinny men getting jacked and build muscle, or more so with overweight men getting lean and weight loss?
I would say, if you had to pick one, it'd probably be like the skinny fat guy, right? The dad bod kind of guy who's got not a lot of muscle, but also has, like a belly and not in great shape. I also have a lot of guys that are like myself that are in their 40s that are kind of just meatheads that have been training forever. But like when you get to 40, things don't work the way they used to. You can't train the same way. then like, oh, your joints hurt and everything. So I work with a lot of those guys too. So it's a little bit of a mix of those. Years ago it was all just athletes, just high school, college, pro athletes. But now it's kind of that little bit of a mix between the guy who's been training forever and just doesn't know what to do anymore because things don't work, and then just like the skinny fat guy.
Skinny fat guy. And by the skinny fat guy, it's the guy who's lost a lot of muscle over time. And he also has a good amount of fat, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. Which do you think is harder to overcome? Do you think it's harder to overcome being a skinny fat, low in muscle mass, or it's harder to be like 30 pounds, 40 pounds overweight, where maybe you have a decent amount of muscle mass that you've been able to maintain? I know a lot of guys who are pretty big, they have maybe a decent amount, not a ton of muscle. Which one do you think is?
Skinny fat's the hardest. Like those are my natural genetics. That's why I wrote the hard gainer column for 10 years in men's fitness, because even back then when I was training, like the college and pro athletes, where guys would be like, oh, I'm a hard gainer, but they would say ripped all year. I'm like, no, you're not a hard gainer. You're just not eating enough. You're just lazy. You know what I mean? Like a hard gainer is someone who's skinny fat, like you have whale skin, but you have no muscle. That's really hard, because then when someone's starting out, it's like, you got to make the decision. Oh man, do we go super hard on losing fat, and then you're going to weigh 130 and like just blow away in the wind, or do we go try to gain muscle, but then, like your insulin sensitivity is not that great. So you're gaining 2 pounds of fat for every 1 pound of muscle. So the skinny fat's way harder. If someone just has a lot of muscle on them, they're probably going to be, their metabolism is going to be better. They're just burning more calories all day. So it's easier for them just to lose a bunch of fat, and then they look better. Then they look jacked. Whereas if the skinny fat guy loses a bunch of fat, he kind of just looks skinny, So it's a much longer road for that guy.
Now you're no longer skinny fat. No, you're just.
Yeah, now you're just skinny. Yeah.
Now you're just a skinny guy.
Yeah.
Overall. Yeah. So what would be the most important thing for a guy or a girl, right? There's skinny fat girls out there for sure, where in clothes they look pretty lean, but then outside of it, they're still very low in skeletal muscle mass. If we were to do a body composition analysis, and maybe metabolically, they may not be in the best place, maybe even have insulin resistance. For somebody who is low in skeletal muscle mass, maybe has some extra adipose tissue on their bodies, and metabolically, they're not very healthy, what would they need to focus on first and foremost to get their body composition more optimal?
So, yeah, I mean, normally hormonally, those people are not in the best situation, so they're probably going to have high cortisol. They're like overthinkers. They're type A. They're not sleeping well. They're stressed out. They overthink. They're anxiety ridden. So we got to address those kind of things. They also, like I think you just mentioned, they don't have great insulin sensitivity. So I like them to train a little bit more frequently, but short workouts. Like they generally don't have great work capacity. So I'd rather have someone like that train 5 days a week, but do like 6 to 10 work sets, like, 30, 40 minutes max, stuff that's not going to stress their CNS, because their CNS is always just, in hyperdrive, right? Because they're, like I said, their cortisol and adrenaline's through the roof all day. So like we want to do basic heavy strength training, 6 to 10 reps, 3 minutes rest, lower volume, not like circuit training and low rest periods and high reps and things like that are proven to actually stress your CNS more. So things like that. And then of course, just, eating enough protein. Tons of times those people just don't eat enough, like I said earlier. So, just getting their metabolism cranked up a little bit. What I'll do sometimes with a lot of those people is they would think like, hey, you're probably going to cut my calories way down. I'm like, now your metabolism's kind of shot. So for the first 2 to 3 weeks, I might have you do 20 times body weight and crank your calories up just to get your metabolism relevant. Because a lot of those guys too, their body temperature is like 96. They walk around freezing. So their metabolism's just shot, right? So I'll be like, all right, let's reduce the amount of stimulants. Let's reduce the stress in the training. Let's improve your sleep. And then let's get your metabolism revved up by eating way more. And what happens a lot of times is it could go either way, but like it's pretty much what happens is they'll gain a little bit of weight, then on the plateau, then they'll start losing weight. And then also if you have 30 pounds of fat to lose and we start you at 8 times body weight with calories, like where are we going to go when you hit that inevitable plateau in 30 days or 6 weeks or something? Nowhere, right? So we got to crank you up. And then again, a lot of times I'll get people losing weight on that. So they're like, well, let's just keep that until we have to lower it. Now we can come down to 18 times body weight or 16. And then we have so far to go, right? We have an ace up our sleeve for the next 6 months. Whereas when we start super low, we're just digging such a deep hole. What are we going to do there?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I see this very often with women quite a bit too. And I know you work predominantly with men, but women who have been under eating, right? Because that's
Yeah.
what they're taught is to diet, cut calories super low, probably not getting a whole lot of protein, doing a ton of cardio, so killing their muscle mass. And then, going through phases of overeating, right? Because let's go out, let's party, let's have some drinks, and then let's eat a lot of the shitty food. And then they end up in that skinny fat place where
Yeah.
they've lost a good amount of muscle because of over dieting, doing too much cardio, not focusing on their skeletal muscle mass. And then on top of it, too, they've been overeating and then they've put on some extra weight from those different periods overall. So,
Yeah. And for so many years, I worked with a lot of women too, and it was the same thing you just described, and we had to undo all that all the time.
yeah, I think it's even sometimes harder with women, for them to
It
really
is.
bounce back, because when you tell a woman to increase your calories, like what you're saying, and they've been dieting for a while, like they don't want to do it at all.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
like bring up calories. And what you're saying actually is for somebody who is maybe in that skinny fat place, which is honestly, I think where a lot of people end up even later in life. And it's the hardest thing to break away from, especially for like postmenopausal women now, where their hormones are shot and their insulin levels are off and they've never done strength training and they've had calories so low to try to fix that. I'd say that's like the hardest person to work with. I'm not sure what your opinion is about that.
No, I agree 100%. Yeah. I've had a couple friends come to mind that are very well known. I'm not going to mention them. They're both on TV quite a bit. And that was a challenge. And I get it, because they have to be in front of the camera all the time. And I'm like, you're eating 600 calories a day. Like, there's literally no solution. There's no drug. There's nothing we can do, but we have to get your metabolism revved up. So you have to eat more. And they would just, 2-3 weeks into it, they'd be like, oh, I feel terrible. I was like, yeah, because everything's shot. Like, there's no other fix here. It's not going to be a 30-day fix. It's not even going to be a 90-day fix. Like, you need to commit to this for like 6 months to a year.
Mm-hmm. And what you're
and who wants to hear that, right? It's like, no, I want the quick fix.
Yeah. It's scary. Yeah. To have to up the calories. And I even just told a guy about this yesterday. And I said, what's going to happen? Because he was down about 1,500 calories as a guy, a pretty big guy weighing over 200 pounds, upping his calories, and then focusing on more resistance training instead of doing, cardio. He was doing 75 hard, which is awesome. But I mean, you're training a lot, right? You're doing 2 times per day. You're doing at least 45 minutes of cardio overall. And I had to explain to him, the goal is not for you to maybe even lose weight right away, but the goal is for your body to work more efficiently. And if we give you more calories and you don't gain weight, what happened there? Your body actually maintained where it was already maintaining at a lower calorie intake with more output, but it's actually working more efficiently overall with the food that it's getting. And that's really ultimately the goal. Even if sometimes it's the mindset is just, I want to lose weight right off the bat. And it's kind of coming back up for that. So you'd say someone in that state, the best thing is upping calories. And then you said focusing more on strength training.
Yeah, 100%. And just keeping the volume low. Like 75 hard, I love the concept of it. Like, I love what Andy does, but he even says it's not a weight loss program. So many people that go through 75 hard, for the amount of physical activity they do, the amount of weight they lose doesn't equate to that. So it proves to anyone, hey, it's not just, do more activity and you're going to get leaner. Like, you got to fix your hormonal profile and all those things we're talking about. You got to, a lot of times, most of the time for me, it's actually do less, get more sleep, manage your stress better, train less,
Yeah. And I know that's what you speak to quite a bit on your platform for a lot of the busy guys who need to get in the workouts, and we tend to overthink it quite a bit. In speaking a lot about the skinny fat guy, I want to switch gears here. In terms of optimal body composition, what would you say that is for a man, in your opinion?
Well, it's hard to try to go on like a quote unquote bulking phase, or just even, not bulking kind of. A lot of people think it's like, oh, I'm just eating donuts. It's not that. It's like, but if you're trying to eat to gain muscle and you're above 15% body fat, it's just not that great. Like, you're just going to gain a lot of fat with it. So you really want to get lean. I mean, ideally get down to 10%. Which is pretty hard. Like 10%, I don't think a lot of people realize, like 10%, you're almost ready for a magazine cover as a guy. That's ideal, but 12 is good. 15 would be the minimum before I would say, let's start really jamming calories and trying to grow.
Yeah. I was actually at 10% a while myself as a woman, but I
had
that's issues, and I know it's different for guys versus girls.
Yeah.
Do you have like an idea range for women? I know you mainly work with men, but for an optimal body composition?
off the top of my head, I don't have the
Yeah.
go-to number. Yeah.
Yeah. And it varies. I know
Yeah.
for women, we have to be so much more sensitive with
Yeah.
getting to the lower numbers. I mean, I had all my health issues once I
Yep.
got to 10%, and some women can naturally maintain a lower body composition before they run into issues. I can very easily maintain as a female, I think like 14% without any issues. But as soon as I go down much lower, hormonally, I definitely start to suffer overall. But guys are different. Guys can get to a much lower body composition than women and still remain in optimal health. Do you think
They can, but there's definitely a threshold to that, just like you said with yourself there. Like, like health and aesthetics are not the same thing. They're a little bit different. Like, so you may be like, hey, I look my best at 7%. Yeah. But now all of a sudden, your libido's dead, your immune system's shot, you're getting sick more often, recovery's not that great. So you got to find that sweet spot. It's definitely not one and the same. There's some people who will just get super lean and they feel great and nothing happens. And those people are genetically blessed. And, I'm envious, but most people, myself included, like when I'm my leanest, I tend to get sick more. I don't sleep as well. My recovery is not as great, so there's a trade-off there. You got to figure out what's right for you.
Yeah. In terms of not necessarily having the most aesthetically pleasing body, but still a very good body composition and optimal health. Would you say that's 10% or would you say that's different?
I still think it's different for different people, but it's somewhere between 10 and 15. I mean, at 15, if you have a decent amount of muscle mass, you're still going to look good as a guy,
Yeah, that makes sense for sure.
Yeah.
And I think age probably, I would imagine, would play a big role too.
Yeah.
Being able to be in optimal health closer to 10% if you're in your 20s is probably very different if you're
totally.
in your 60s and then trying to get down to 10% with everything that we notice with hormones and recovery and all of that.
Yeah.
What do you think is a good macronutrient range for most men who are wanting to get to an optimal body composition?
So I would say 95% of the guys who come to me to get leaner, I have to lower their fat intake, which blows their mind because everyone's been so wrapped up in high fat and keto and everything for, I don't know, a decade or so now. So I'm like, no. Those carbs aren't making you fat. The fat is making you fat. They're like, wait, what? That goes against everything every high fat guy says. And I'm like, yeah, just trust me. You'll be able to eat more carbs if we lower your fat intake. And every time they get leaner and every time they feel better, especially if you take a type A guy, the guy I described earlier, and you put him on no carbs, he's going to lose his mind. Like one of my best friends is that kind of guy. And he, within 3 days, he was losing his mind. I was like, dude, go eat a sandwich. Like that's the worst diet for you. And he felt so much better. So what I'll do is typically, I'll do about 1 gram per pound of protein. I will do between 0.3 and 0.4 times body weight for fat. And then the rest is going to be carbs. And I'll usually never have anyone go below 100 grams of carbs a day. Even 150 sometimes, but the carbs, it kind of like the protein and the fat, we keep pretty much there. And the carbs kind of just depends on their weight, their, how often they're training, how hard they're training, how much muscle mass they have, their insulin sensitivity, where they're where they're storing fat, things like that. So that's just something I kind of eyeball and judge, but it's anywhere from 0.75 times body weight to maybe 2 times. I get guys lean on 2 times body weight. So
yeah. So you're not a big fan of low carb?
No.
No. Not for body composition, at least, I would imagine. So 1 gram per pound is it ideal body weight or total body weight?
I mean, I say total body weight, but if someone's 300 pounds, obviously we'll lower it a bit. But I tend to just work with guys who are in that range of not really needing to lose more than like 50 pounds, like 30 to 50 pounds. So we pretty much keep it there. I mean, if it's 50 or 60, I might go down to like 0.82 or something like that,
Yeah.
Especially if they're only at like 0.5 or something, to go to 1 gram is going to be a lot.
Yeah.
So all these things are a little bit kind of nuanced just based on the individual.
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest problem for most people is just getting in enough protein. Do you find that most of the guys are under eating with protein that you work with, especially in the skinny fat category?
It's hard to say because most of my guys kind of are at least like somewhat educated and been following me for a while. So they didn't just decide one day at 46, like I've never read a thing about training or nutrition. You know what I mean? So they're kind of a little bit more educated. So they're pretty much on the right track. I honestly feel like it's more they're just eating too much fat because they thought fat was just a free pass. Like as long as I keep my carbs low, I could just eat 400 grams of fat a day. And it's like, nah, we gotta cut. Like they're eating 80% lean ground beef. And I'm like, bro, you may as well be going to McDonald's. Like we got to get you on like 93 or 95% lean meat. And then eventually what happens is once those guys get to where they want to be, especially if they're in their 40s, then I will bring their fat up. I might bring their fat up to 0.5 or even higher, just depending. But at first, 100% of the time, they'll get leaner if I lower their fat intake.
Yeah. What do you think is most important for them to focus on first? Do you think it's more so the macronutrient side of everything or the training side of everything? I know that's kind of hard. You have to do both.
Yeah.
Diet or fitness, if you had to pick. One plays the bigger role.
That's such a tough one. I think it's diet, honestly. Yeah, I think it's diet. I mean, honestly, if I'm going hierarchy of fat loss, I would go sleep and stress, then nutrition, then training. Which is crazy because training is my favorite part of it. And that's where my most expertise is. But like, I think those other things are more important.
Yeah. Because if you're not sleeping, you're not recovering. We just had Dr. Kirk Parsley on talk.
Oh, okay.
All intricately about overall. Yeah.
Yeah. He's great. He's great.
So do you think somebody can bulk or put on a good amount of muscle and lose fat simultaneously? I know there's a lot of people online who speak to, lose fat and build muscle. Can that happen in the same moment, or is these kind of two different processes that we need to focus on in two separate periods?
It can 100% happen in a couple cases. You're a newbie, then it can happen easily, no problem. First 90 days, you're going to gain muscle and lose fat. If you're young, if you're in your 20s, it can definitely happen. If you're doing everything wrong, let's say you've been training for 20 years, but your diet's been shit and your training's been shit for 20 years, and then I completely, tweak it. We do a 180. Then you might have 30 days to 6-8 weeks, but then we're going to have to pick one goal. The more advanced you get, it's going to be way harder to do that. Like for me, there's no way I'm doing that at this. I got to pick one or the other,
Yeah. And I think a lot of people go to extremes, like extreme bulking and then extreme cutting. That's pretty notorious in the bodybuilding world for sure, on season, off seasons. And I don't know if you agree with this, but I've shared with a lot of my clients, like you can focus on both, let's say over 6 months, or even 3 months. You could probably, do some mini cutting, change your workouts a little bit, maybe go into a slight calorie deficit, and then shift for a bit and focus a bit more on the muscle side, paying attention to food. And in that 6 month or even 3 month period, if you're really doing it really well, you have lost fat and you built muscle. But we did try to focus on both at the exact same moment of time, because that's what I see a lot of people doing, right? Is they're in a calorie deficit and they're trying to build a ton of muscle, and they're just like staying at one place, and they're frustrated because their weight's not going anywhere.
Yeah. And people tend to think myopically, like everyone looks at things in just like a 12-week kind of period, right? But if you've been training for more than 5 years, certainly more than 10 years, how much muscle are you going to gain in a year? Like 3 pounds, 5 pounds would be amazing, right? And so if you think about you're going to gain 5 pounds of muscle in a year, how much extra calories do you actually need? You don't need to be going on that bulking diet you were doing when you were 18 and eating pancakes every meal. Like it's a very small surplus. So I think when you keep that in mind, like if we're looking at a long-term thing here, you're just progressing in the gym each week. You're doing what you should be. You're optimizing your sleep and recovery. Just for 5 pounds of muscle, how many extra calories above maintenance is that? It's not a lot. Like you don't need this huge surplus of 1,000 extra calories. It might be 350, depending on your metabolism. Maybe it's 500, but like if you do that consistently, in 12 weeks, you might see nothing, but 5 pounds of muscle at the end of the year, that's huge. Even guys like myself, I'm 48 and I've been training since I was 12. Like if I could gain 3 pounds of muscle in a year, that'd be huge. That does not require a huge caloric surplus at all.
What would you say are some other things that really help optimize muscle gain? In terms of specifically training or anything, right? So getting into a slight calorie surplus, not overdoing the calorie surplus. So maybe just around 200, 300 calories, but doing that consistently. And I think that's the key. A lot of guys think they're in a calorie surplus, and they also are like, I'm the skinny guy, right? Yeah. And I've looked at their nutrition before and I'm like, dude, you ate 3,000 calories for 1 or 2 days. And then for the rest of the week, you're at maintenance or a calorie deficit. So your net is you're not always really in this calorie surplus, and you're just eating these giant ass meals and thinking you should put on weight, but you're not getting enough protein throughout the day. So a lot of people think that they're getting in enough calories, and they're really not, especially if they're that skinny guy, then they're just doing those large meals there. But I think, for what you're speaking to, it's getting in that slight calorie surplus, doing it consistently. And then I would imagine training too would play a really big role in maybe changing that up.
Yeah, training for sure. Everything you just said about nutrition, consistency, that's it. Then again, dialing in sleep and stress, because if you're not sleeping, it doesn't really matter. So we got to optimize sleep. We got to reduce stress as much as possible. And then training, a lot of people, the majority of people, if I go into a public gym, most people are just going about it the wrong way. You've got to track stuff. People are changing their workouts too frequently, just trying to be entertained. Like they're scrolling through Instagram, and so they change splits, routines, do a different exercise every week. There's no consistency. Like if you embrace monotony in anything, in business, in sports, in training, whatever, and do the same boring things repeatedly forever, like Kobe going to the gym at 4:30 and shooting free throws, that's how you actually make progress. So you do the same things, you track your workouts. Progressive overload is huge. First and foremost, before progressive overload, you really need to learn how to train and how to execute properly. So I'm super big on that. Just, dialing in your technique, dialing in your form, making sure you're connecting, not going too heavy. Most people go too heavy. And then a lot of times when I start with someone, I'll cut their weights back 30, 40%. And it's a huge ego check. But because I'm like, dude, that looks like shit. All you're getting out of that press is shoulder and elbow pain. And maybe you're developing your front delts a little. You're not even feeling your pecs. You're training your triceps a little, but it's supposed to be a chest exercise. On back, it's just all biceps. You're not getting anywhere on that. Leg stuff, you're just crushing your hips, knees, and low back, and there's zero tension on your quads. So I'll cut everyone's weights way back. Let's spend a few months really dialing in execution, getting your form down. And then once you're connecting and feeling the right muscles, now all of a sudden, all that inflammation, that joint pain goes away. So your body doesn't have to waste recuperative abilities healing that all the time. Now you have more, energy to put towards growth. And then I want progressive overload slowly over time. I want you to be able to do more weight, more reps with the same weight, whatever. That's huge. We do want to track that. I just think, and it's funny for me saying this now, 30 years into doing this, because nobody was saying that when I first came out and was putting stuff out in 2001 online. I was really hammering the importance of progressive overload, and you got to get stronger. But I think people just took it too far, where it's every single time they go to the gym, they're like, oh, I got to put 5 more pounds in the bar. I got to do a rep more than last week. But dude, life doesn't work like that, especially when you get older and you have stress and you have, real world responsibilities. There's no possible way you could go in. Let's say you train 4 days a week and do 5 exercises. So guys will go in and try to do PR 20 exercises a week. It's that's never going to happen. There's no other physical endeavor that you think that would happen, right? Nobody thinks that every day they play basketball, they're going to be better than yesterday. Otherwise, everyone will be Michael Jordan in a year. You're not going to shave a stroke off your golf game every single day. You're not even going to get better at playing an instrument every single day. Things just happen slowly over time. But for some reason, people think that with the gym. They think, oh yeah, if I don't get stronger today, I failed. Something's fucked up. It's no, you're just human. That's what happens. So progressive overload has to be just slow. And it's kind of like if you invested in a stock, right? It wouldn't just go like this up forever. You're like, oh my God, I made 50 million a day. It's no, it's going to go up. It's going to plateau. It's going to go down. It's going to go back up a little. That's just the normal ebb and flow of things. So if you can dumbbell press 50s for 8 today, then in a year, hopefully you could do 65s, right? But I don't think you need to do 51 and a quarter next week, 52 and a half the following week, 53 and 3/4, then 55s and 60s. It just doesn't work like that. All that does is you get burnt out and you get injured. And so many people are on that never-ending cycle of I'm progressing, I'm injured. I'm progressing, I'm injured. And it just never ends. So
many of you guys know my story of losing my health, dealing with hormonal imbalances, thyroid issues, depression, anxiety, and gut issues that were so severe. I almost had my entire large intestine removed, and Western medicine completely failed me. They gave me trash can diagnosis like IBS, depression, gave me a bunch of medications. And, if I wouldn't have taken my health in my own hands today, I would be without an entire organ, literally. And that's why I created what I wish I had, what I needed, a holistic mind and body approach, a functional medicine approach that said, why do we have this problem in the first place? And what can we do to restore function? This is the difference between thriving instead of just surviving and managing your symptoms. So if you're somebody who is sick and tired of being sick and tired, dealing with stubborn gut issues or hormonal imbalances or weight loss that you feel like is not moving anywhere, or thyroid issues and autoimmune condition, there is hope. There is another approach. And me and my team of registered dietitians, we want to help you. We want to be the support there for you. We want to do the functional medicine lab testing, look at your gut, your hormones, your thyroid, your adrenals, deficiencies, toxins that can have in your body, get to know what you're doing with your nutrition, look at your lifestyle, look at your previous medical history, and help you create a customized plan to not just only heal, but get to the best health of your entire life. So if you're somebody who's ready to take a root cause approach to healing and step into the best version of you, fill out our application on our website, rachelscheer.com, and book a free 30-minute call. Absolutely free to do this call. Our goal on this call is to better get to know your goals and how this approach may work for you. So click the link in the show notes and book a free call if you would like to learn more. Yeah, that was my early 20s. I would
Yeah, me too.
I would squat 225, weighing 100 and I think 15 pounds.
Wow.
And I would do full 3 sets of 10 doing that. And to this day, now my low back thanks me for that all the time.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
now I know we're near, I'm stupid and lift as heavy at all, but there's a little bit of an ego check of like, man, I actually used to lift heavier and now I actually lift like half of that, but there's no way picturing myself in my 40s and 50s squatting 225 as like this itty bitty frame. It just, it was stupid overall. But I do love that you mentioned form, because a lot of people just say, lift heavy, how to build muscle, get in a little bit of a calorie surplus, get enough protein, and lift heavy. And it's like, what does that mean? What does that mean?
Right.
Like, just like lift heavy. And then you have people who don't know a whole lot about fitness, just going in, picking up as heavy weight as they can. And then, like you said, like hurting themselves and then wondering what they're doing wrong, or they're not even hitting the right muscle group at all.
Yep.
And they're developing, these imbalances in their body. And they're like, why am I not getting the physique that I'm wanting to get? It's like, well, you're using your traps and you're not actually using your shoulders with the workout that you're doing there. So now you have like this little hunchback that's happening.
Yeah. Overall. So much. Yep.
So in terms of progressive overload, what is the best practice for that overall? I know you said it's not just every single day going into the gym and lifting heavier and heavier and heavier. Do you recommend doing like a pyramid type program? So going up, kind of coming down every single month. Do you recommend that people go up in weight and then come down maybe in reps? Is there any kind of certain practices you have people follow?
I like to keep it super simple. So I've done everything under the sun, and going back to just simplicity works best. So I'll generally keep people in a 6 to 10 rep range on everything. If they're newbies and they're weaker, I might even limit it to 6 to 8. Especially if they're trying to learn something, their technique's not that great. You're going to learn better and have less of a chance to make mistakes with fewer reps per set. Whereas if you get above 10, you start to do 13, like you just start, the reps start breaking down. There's a higher chance of the reps breaking down, your form breaking down, and injury the higher you go in reps. So I'd rather have people do lower reps, maybe more sets at the beginning. And then in terms of progression, so again, we're staying in that 6 to 10 rep range. If you're a newbie and we're learning technique, then I'm not even going to worry about getting close to failure, because failure is when things are going to break down. Training to failure is a skill that you need to learn. And what I mean by it's a skill, you need to be able to get to those 1 to 2 last reps close to failure with the form not changing at all. The only thing that's happening is the weight is slowing down. And that's what you need for hypertrophy, for muscle growth. You actually need that involuntary slowing of the contraction speed, which is technically mechanical tension, but without even knowing those things. So anyway, no failure at the beginning, learn technique, and then slowly over time, okay, good. Now let's just add a little bit more weight. Like if you're doing 30s, let's go up to eventually 35s. When you can handle those, we'll move up. And then again, more advanced, we're going to start training, taking each set closer to failure. But I want, like I said, I want to look at what's the least we can do to produce the results that we want. Because most people are already stressed out. They're already fatigued. They're already not sleeping well. And so training is just another stress. Every set is another stressor in your life. So we want to do hard sets, the fewest we need to elicit the response we want, and then get home and recover. So people don't think of it that way. They're just like, oh, I'm just going to do a bunch of sets. And it's like, yeah, but that's not doing anything. Let's optimize your technique, take those sets to failure, rest 3 minutes between sets, not superset, not be doing, 4 to 5, 10 sets of the same exercise with 90 seconds rest in. I don't believe in any of that kind of stuff. And then again, just back to progression, it should be the first form of progression is better technique. So we might work together for 12 weeks and barely change the weight. It's just, we are improving technique. You're like, oh, all of a sudden now my shoulder doesn't hurt. Oh, now I felt that. Great. That's a huge improvement. Because intramuscular coordination is what we're working on at the beginning. We're just improving that, and you can get bigger and I know everyone always wants to progress. Like I get it. I always want to progress too. If I do a new exercise, I'm always like, oh, I got to add 10 pounds next week. But the reality is your connective tissue doesn't adapt as fast. So for example, there's a really well-known gymnastics coach, Christopher Sommer, and he's written some great books and stuff like that. He will not let you progress. Like if you're trying to do, let's say, a front lever, and let's say I go there, I do the tuck version, right? And then I'm like, oh, I'm ready to move on to the single leg. And he's like, no. Your elbows, shoulders, all the things will not adapt for 8 weeks. So you can't, even if you have the strength to do it, you can't do it for 8 weeks. You have to master that. So people just underestimate how long your connective tissue takes to adapt to. And then they're always like, oh, I wonder why everything hurts. Well, there's one reason there. Like Frank Zane was, when was Frank Zane Mr. Olympia? 1980, I believe. It's still known as one of the best physiques of all time. And what Frank Zane would say is he goes, I'll do a dumbbell press. And I remember, I'm such a meathead historian. Like I remember everything about everything in entire game history, but he goes, I'll dumbbell press with 60s. And then when the 60s are easy and I feel like I've mastered them, then I'll go to the 65s. He goes, I don't have a set time frame for when I go to the 65s. Whereas nowadays, the culture of Instagram and everything is, I'm doing 70s next week and I'm doing 75s the following week. He's like, yeah, but again, you're always injured and you're getting nowhere. So it has to just be slow and consistent over time.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't have the ability to really listen to their body too.
Yeah.
It's just like what I should do, like, right, like rest days, Saturdays, or rest days or Mondays. And like for me, I don't have a set day of the week where I'm like, this is rest day.
Yeah.
This is leg day. It's like I give myself a rest day when my body's saying like, Rachel, you need it. I'm noticing my training going down. I'm not feeling very like creative, excited about the things I'm wanting to do. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a rest day. Now I can go through sprints where I've worked out 2 weeks consistent, not crazy. I don't do cardio or anything like that, but I get in, a 30-minute lift and I'm rotating different muscle groups. And I feel relatively okay. Maybe I'm not recovering as great as I could, but I'm just listening to my body. And I think
that's huge. Yeah. Huge. You got to be able to do that. Whereas back in my 20s, I would go in, and I know so many people still do this. You look at your training log, and you're like, all right, I did 315 for 8. No matter what happens, I have to get 315 for 9 today. Yeah. That's the day you're like, oh, I just broke my back. It's like, no, just go in and do what you can do. Or like you said, take a rest day, and then you'll, live to fight another day. You come back next week and feel better.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up failure too, because that's also taught as like always go till failure. Do you think people should, at the beginning, you said not go towards failure and then progress into possibly going towards failure, but still maintaining the form that they need to maintain, even when they're going towards failure? Are there periods where they should step away from trying to go towards failure once they enter into that phase?
It's so nuanced, right? Like there's some people who are just radically opposed to failure and it burns their CNS out. And there's some people who are like, always go to failure on everything. But I think there's a gray area where, again, newbies, beginners, people who are super stressed out, people who are learning, definitely don't go to failure. But you just reach a point where if you've been training for a really long time and you're still trying to build muscle, what do we have left in our toolbox? Like you have to do something. So just pushing that, it's just another tool in the toolbox, pushing close to failure. You get to a point where you're just going to have to do that eventually. But the thing is too, like, failure, it's so hard to describe, right? Because one person might go to failure And I'm like, that was perfect. But the other person does 3 more reps, but they're still a failure. But I was like, yeah, those last 3 reps were shit. And all they're doing are destroying your shoulder. So it's like, it's nuance. It's a gray area. Like for me, failure is form failure. So when the form starts to break down, if it's slower, that's fine. It should be slower than the first rep. But as soon as that elbow starts to flare out a little, or if you're squatting and your ass starts shooting up, like for me, that's when the set's over. Before that happens is when the set's over. Now you could do 2 to 4 more reps, especially if you're like, cranking music and you have training partners. Yeah, you could do 2 to 4 more. Did those do anything? No. Now the tension's not in your quads. It's all in your hips and you're breaking your back. It's like your spine looks like a question mark. None of those things are good. So to me, it's form failure.
Yeah, I love that you say form, but then I would imagine that the other piece too would be just paying attention to your recovery and your stress too.
Yeah.
If you need to go into failure, I know that's what you said is the number one thing for people to focus on. If you're super stressed out, you're not sleeping very well, relying on 6 cups of coffee to get through the day, probably towards failure is not going to be the best thing for you to do ultimately in your central nervous system.
Yeah. Then I would leave 1 to 2 in the tank on most sets.
Leave 1 to 2. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on cardio?
I think
for optimal body composition.
For optimal body composition, the majority of guys don't need that much of it. It's the least effective thing. Any picture of me that's out. So I did a thing. And being in my 40s, it's not the healthiest thing to do. I wouldn't recommend it. But I was like, so many people were just doing so much cardio. I was like, I'm going to do a year of 0 cardio and take a picture. And like I have like an 8-pack and I did 0 cardio and I just did strength training 6 to 8 reps and resting 3 minutes between. So I think it's more nutrition and sleep and recovery and optimizing your training. I do think as you get older, it's super important for overall health and, cardiovascular health, cognitive function, recovery, all the things. And the pendulum has swung so many times back and forth on that throughout my career of the last 30 years, where it was like, in the 80s and 90s, like do cardio all the time. Then in the late 90s and early 2000s, everyone's like, no, never do cardio. And now I would say Joel Jamieson has really kind of led the charge for people doing a lot more cardio, conditioning, whatever, especially like low intensity zone 2 type of stuff. So I think it's really good. And there are some people who just can't lose fat. Like they do need that. Like I have some guys that they literally have to do 5 days a week of just that kind of zone 2 kind of stuff for 30 minutes every single day, or they just don't get anywhere. And even if you can get somewhere with no cardio, again, not that it's healthy, but you're going to get to the point where if you're 10 and you're trying to get to 8%, or if you're 9 and trying to get to 8, whatever, at some point we got to do something, right? If your calories are all the way down, training's optimized, sleep's optimized, then you have to add in cardio. I think most people overdo the high intensity stuff. And again, I know I sound like a broken record, but most people are just burnt, fried, anxiety-ridden, cortisol, the things. So more low intensity stuff, right? That zone 2 stuff for 30 to 45 minutes. And then I'll have people do 1 HIIT session a week. Maximum will be 2, but usually it's 1. Whereas most people are doing HIIT, I don't know, 3 to 5 days a week. So I get people stopping doing that. So my thing is like, whatever anyone comes in, I have them do the exact opposite. Okay. We're adding more carbs. We're cutting down the cardio. Like we're adding more sleep, all those things. And that tends to work exponentially better in my experience.
Whatever you're doing is not working. So we're going to the opposite of what you're doing.
Yeah.
So not a fan of HIIT, high intensity interval training.
No. And I totally see the benefits. I think it's great, especially as you get older. Like the thing you lose as you get older is speed. You might be able to maintain strength. You still have the same amount of muscle mass, but you definitely lose speed. So I think everyone as they age should be doing some kind of explosive power stuff. Just, medicine, and you want to be careful and be safe as you get older. But you should always be doing some kind of jumps throughout the week. I'll always have guys, start workouts with, 3 to 5 sets of 3 to 5 jumps, medicine ball throws, and then short sprints are going to be great. Short sprints, preferably with some kind of either really short on flat ground. So there's not a huge risk of popping your hamstring, just like 10-yard sprint repeats, or sprinting on a hill is way safer, or sprinting with a sled or something like that. But at least once a week, you want to be doing some kind of, sprinting, even if it's just on a bike or something like that. You want to get that explosive power stuff, and definitely throw and jump multiple times throughout the week.
Would you consider sled pushes to be a HIIT workout? Those are my favorite to do.
Yeah, they definitely could be, right? Like if you're
but not as
sprinting,
impact related.
exactly. Yeah, that's why I love them. There's no impact. There's no eccentric component. Super easy to recover from. So yeah, if I'm doing, and I think the way most people tend to do hit, I don't agree with either. I like to keep it at 10 seconds hard. The max I would go up to is 20 seconds. It just becomes really detrimental. And again, more of a risk of injury, especially if you're sprinting or something. So we'll go 10 to 20 seconds and rest anywhere from 50 seconds to 3 minutes, just depending on the goal and depending on the person. Because I always talk about, like, if you look at and this comparison's been made a million times, right? The marathon runner versus the sprinter. But when people try to emulate sprinters, they'll do 40 seconds on, 20 seconds off, or some crazy thing like that. I'm like, dude, look at every sprinter in the 100 meters. They're shredded, right? They're 6% body fat. They'll do 1 10-second sprint and rest 5 to 10 minutes. So they're not doing what you're doing in that class or on the bike at the end of a workout. That's actually really stressful on your CNS. And, you wonder why you're getting sick all the time. So I like really low stress, high intensity stuff, which I know sounds like a little bit of a conundrum, but so 10 to 15 seconds hard and then adequate rest periods.
I haven't thought of it that way with like the sprinter, because you do hear that analogy quite a bit overall.
Yeah.
Have you ever done dead mill pushes before?
Yeah.
Those are my favorite.
Yeah, those are great. Yeah.
Awesome. What would you say is the optimal amount of time someone needs to dedicate to training? Not that they'd want to dedicate, but that they would need to dedicate, like this is the minimum, because I know you're very much about being more effective with the time that you have there in the gym.
Yeah. It kind of depends. So many people that I work with tend to be, again, those type A people. So if they're going to do something, they like to do it all the time. I'm kind of like that, like just to build that. And I think that's just like an overall life philosophy. Like if it's important, do it every day, build a habit. So I'd rather see those guys, instead of going to the gym for 3 days a week and spending 90 minutes in there, I'd rather they go 5 days and spend like 30 to 40 minutes in there. But overall, it's like, 3-4 hours a week is plenty. And you're going to get, 80-90% of the results doing that. The priority is always going to be those strength training workouts. So if we're doing 5 30-minute workouts or 4 45-minute workouts, whatever, I want to do that. Then the cardio is going to be next. In terms of body comp, in overall health, we should be getting the cardio in too. At least 2 low intensity sessions of 30 minutes a week and 1 hit session. So that adds to it. But if you're just looking at body comp, you're not worried about health markers, the training and the diet's going to be enough, in my opinion.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you feel like most people need to add in cardio that you work with, like as, hey, go to the gym, do cardio? Or do you feel like, I guess we live a very sedentary lifestyle. So it's hard to say. Like for me, I try to get outside and go for a walk, and I always consider that to be like my cardio every single day. So I guess if you're pretty active, but most people aren't. So for optimal health, cardio, maybe in the gym if you're not pretty active throughout the course of the week, and then
I like to prioritize 10,000 steps a day first and foremost. I just think there's so many benefits to just being outside. Like it's just unnatural to be inside and artificial lighting and staring at screens and all the things, right? So I'd rather someone, however long that takes you to get 10,000 steps, maybe that's an hour a day, I'd rather you do that. And then then the next thing we would stack on top of that is, okay, now go to the gym and do cardio. And when I have people do steady state cardio, I never have them park on a machine for 30 or 40 minutes. I find that's mind numbing. Everyone hates it. Yeah. And also the older you get, just the repetitive nature, like you get off, you're like, oh, my hip flexors are so tight, my back kills. So what I'll prescribe is 3 to 5 minutes on the bike, 3 to 5 minutes on the stepper, 3 to 5 minutes on the incline treadmill, 3 to 5 minutes on the skier, on the rower, and just repeat that. Whatever you have access to. Maybe if you're home and you only have a sled and a skier, so we'll go sled, skier, light kettlebell swing, jump rope, and just repeat that, maintaining that heart rate that we want for 30 to 45 minutes. And that makes it a lot more fun for people who are like, bro, I can't do cardio, I hate it. I'm like, no, it's not going to be what you think. It's going to be so much more fun. They're like, all right, that I could do. That's way better.
Yeah. I've never been a fan of just steady state cardio unless it's outside by my house.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears here for a minute and move into mindset, because like for you and me, like this has become like our routine. It's a part of who we are. It's our life. I don't feel like it's hard for me to maintain my body composition just because it's literally what I've done for the last 15 years of my life. And I enjoy it. I get a benefit from it. I would imagine you do as well. But what do you think are some of the biggest things that are getting in the way, or maybe are excuses from people getting to their optimal body composition? Because a lot of people want it, but they are unable to make the necessary changes that they need to.
Yeah. And I think you just have to start small. Like you just have to stack habits slowly. If you take someone who hasn't done anything in years and you're like, dude, here's all the things you got to do, and you can throw this huge list of a million things, it's crash and burn in 30 days. You know, they're not getting anywhere. So just small steps, slowly, you know, stack it one habit, make it super simple, make it easy, figure out what works for you. What else? And just don't try to add too much or change too much at once. Like I'm not going to take someone who's used to eating an Egg McMuffin in the morning and pizza for lunch and you know, shit dinner and completely do a 180. I'm like, well, how about if you just make the Egg McMuffin? Just get like a sourdough muffin and actually make your eggs so there's not all that poison in it, and just switch up the lunch a little bit. You know, things like that that's sustainable and easy. Get someone, and whatever you can remove, you know, any obstacle you remove, like, okay, let's get you on a meal delivery service. You don't even have to shop for healthy food, because a lot of people are scared to shop for healthy food or they don't know how to do it. So be like, all right, use a healthy meal delivery service. What else can we make easy for you? Build a home gym. Like a lot of guys I work with tend to be, you know, have a decent amount of money. So they're like, yeah, I'll build a whole home gym. What should I get? Great. I'll help you out with that. You know, whatever obstacles you remove, and just simplifying it. And then, you know, in terms of mindset, it's like, once you commit to it, I just find, you know, Bedros has said this a million times, plenty of other people that, you know, friends we have in common. Like, I just find when you commit to something, doing something hard, and you do it repeatedly, and you make that promise to yourself and keep it, your self-esteem goes up, you feel better about yourself. So I just think it's those things. Like for me, that's the biggest thing, is keeping that promise to myself and knowing that, okay, I feel better. I did that. And for me, and I get where people are coming from. Like I'm never going to be one of those guys. Like I think it's funny sometimes when some young trainer will put up a picture of them in the gym or something, and some meme about war or something. I'm like, bro, all you're doing is like eating more chicken and broccoli and doing leg extensions. It's not that tough. You're not a tough guy, but for most people, they don't want to do that. I get it. Like, so for me to make the time to do, there's other things that I know I should do and I want to do. And so for me, that's the victory. Like you just said, you want to train. So we always hear about, oh, you got to get uncomfortable every day. And for some people, that is going to the gym. That's my fucking comfort zone. So I don't wear that as a badge of honor and yell at someone who's lazy, like, you piece of shit. It's like, dude, that's my favorite part of the day, is go to the gym. You know what I mean? But there's other things that are really uncomfortable for me to do, and they sound stupid, but it's like, dude, you couldn't carve out 10 minutes to do that? No, we all have these little roadblocks and these little kind of obstacles, you know? So for me, like, for example, just making the time to read 10 pages a day. Like, of course I have the time, but sometimes I'll get to the end of the day, like, oh, I didn't do that yet. And then I'll force myself to do it, you know, like all things like that. I think anytime you could push yourself out of your comfort zone, it's different for everybody. Like for somebody else, for you and I, we love to train. So that's easy. But it's like, hey, well, learn an instrument, make 10 minutes a day to learn an instrument. Okay. Yeah, that's hard. Take 10 minutes a day to go to, or an hour a day to go to martial arts. Like commit to doing something that's hard. That's hard. Like anything new is always hard. Like, for example, let's say you and I were huge fans of, I don't know, Tiger Woods, but we never played golf. We're like, I wish I could play like Tiger Woods. But do you know how much it's going to take for me to, like, all right, I got to find a guy, I got to hire him, I got to make the time. Everybody that does something new, it always sucks. Like, you just have to accept the fact that everything new, change always sucks. It's like they update your phone or an app. You're like, what the fuck happened? Like, I hate this. I hate this new home screen. You know, like everybody just hates change. So you just have to embrace that and understand it's always going to suck at the beginning. You just have to be willing to be consistent and just plow through.
Yeah, I think at the beginning, like it's never fun, like making a lot of those changes overall, but there has to get to be a point if we want to maintain that optimal body composition where we get some kind of a benefit from it besides just the body composition, right? And I think a lot of people who get started on this journey solely for the perfect body, but they're not enjoying any of the workouts that they're doing. They're not enjoying any of the food. They're eating the boring chicken and the broccoli. Like, you're not going to stick with it. You're not going to stick with it. I don't care how bad you want to have a shredded 6-pack abs, want to look good for that upcoming trip or that vacation that you're not going to, because you're not getting any kind of benefit. So like, I always encourage people of like, what really is it doing for you right now outside of the body composition? Because that's an awesome goal. But if it's just about that, you're not going to stick with it. For me, like working out in the morning and doing all of that, like that helps me get into the right mindset to jump into my work. It's my me time. It's just part of my therapy. So I love working out for that immediate benefit I'm getting right here, right now during the day. Same thing with my food. I like the food that I eat. I had gut issues, and that's why I do all the things with functional medicine. So I enjoy the food that I eat now because it doesn't kill my gut and the food
Yeah.
tastes good. I enjoy steak. I like steak.
Yeah.
It's not a punishment for me to eat steak and sweet potato or veggies, but I probably would not enjoy eating boring chicken and broccoli every single day. So I think there is that. How is this a benefit to me right now? Because if it's just about the body,
Yeah.
nobody's going to stick with that ever.
Yeah. And then I think you might be realistic with people too. Like I'll work with guys who make 7-8 figures and they're like, listen, every Saturday night I'm going to like Peter Luger's steakhouse or something. And I'm eating a loaf of bread and drinking a bottle of wine and having 3 desserts. And I'm like, cool. All right. Then let's just be even stricter the other 6 days. That's totally fine. We can make that work. Like, I think if you're making someone just live a completely Spartan life that they don't like, they don't want it like that, then it's going to be miserable. Like, all right, cool. Let's just earn it throughout the week. And that's totally fine. You got to be realistic about what people want.
Yeah, and how it's adding to your life right now.
Yeah.
What are your current fitness, body composition goals or health goals that you have?
I mean, it's funny because like at 40, I got visible abs for the first time. So 39, Bedros, I assume maybe people know who Bedros is. Bedros and I were 39. We're the same age. He's a month older than me. And we're like, bro, let's just party and do all the things and eat all the things and have so much fun. And so going into my 40th birthday, I was not in great shape. I walked around at I graduated high school at 6 feet tall, 147 pounds, and I got up to 230, and I walked around at like 225 for years. And then I was like, man, I want to have visible abs. Party's over once I turned 40. So I got visible abs, first time ever. And so now it's mentally hard for me to not have visible abs. But of course, at 48, for me to gain muscle, I'd have to be willing to eat a lot. And every time the abs start to blur out, I'm like, oh, man, I don't know. So it's a challenge. So I guess it's like, yeah, of course, everyone wants to be the size of the Rock or whatever. But it's like, I think for me now, I like staying lean. Putting on a few more pounds of muscle is always kind of like the goal. I don't know if I'm willing to eat that much. And then just being healthier, like my sleep could always improve. It's funny because I used to track with a Whoop and an Oura Ring, and then I lost both of them and I stopped for a while, but I was like, I always get 8 hours of sleep. I know I always get 8 hours, and I've had my Oura Ring back for 3 months now, and I never get 8 hours. So I was like, oh, wow. Okay. I'm in bed for 8 hours, but I'm barely getting 7 hours of sleep. So that's like a fun trackable goal for me now. Like every morning I'm like, all right, let's see where I'm at here. And then I can just tweak things like, what do I eat at dinner? How far before bed am I eating? And all the things I do throughout the day. So that's my experiment now, is like, how could I optimize my sleep? And I think that'll just improve a lot of things. So that's really my main thing now, because again, I think sleep's the most important thing. So
yeah. And I think once you have the body composition relatively nailed down, it's like, okay, now I just have these little micro goals, but it becomes less about the body. You're like, I got the body I can maintain pretty easily. It's my normal day-to-day routine. But we start to notice other things like health-wise, like sleep. Like as you get older, sleep tends to get worse and worse, especially as an entrepreneur. I've ran into my fair share. And I'm like, that's the number one thing. I was like, if I could just optimize sleep and get perfect sleep every single night, I would be unstoppable.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm looking better too in the process.
Yeah. Yeah. And then every time I train, in the old days, it used to be just pile on as much weight as possible. Now it's, okay, how can I do an exercise that I've done 50,000 times since 1986? How can I do it even better? And how could I think of a different coaching cue that's going to help people I work with? And how could I just tweak something that, oh my God, there used to be this much shoulder stress and now there's none. And I still get super excited about that. So every workout, like the PR is that for me now. It's like, how can I connect even better, remove joint stress, and come up with even a simpler coaching cue that someone gets this like that? Like, I love that. I'm still obsessed with that to this day.
I love that overall. Where can people find you, learn more about you, check out your podcast and all the things that you're doing?
J.fit. It'll just send you to my homepage, and then at Jay Ferrugia on Instagram, and podcast is Renegade Strength Show.
Okay, this has been awesome. Thank you guys for tuning in. Jay is incredible at men transformation, so definitely go check out all of his content. And this has been Optimal Body RX.